good morning. I want to thank everybody for their prayers for Joyce. She's doing exceptionally well, and found out that she didn't have to get everything done that they thought that she needed done, so she's on the heel on the mend. I just want to thank God for His grace and for His love. That brings me to a point I want to discuss today. How do you view God? To the Christian, God is a God of love and grace. He is their salvation. But some look at God's holiness and they try to cope with it by denying His existence. They look at the intricacies of creation and would rather believe the fairy tale of evolution and happenstance. They would rather believe an explosion of nothing caused by something that doesn't exist created everything around them in perfect order before they would believe in a creator of infinite power and wisdom. Why? Why are there people that are so bent on denying the realities of creation? I believe the answer is found in how they view God. The enemy has deceived so many into believing that God is a tyrant, a bully, a dictator that wants it His way or He'll send everyone to hell. But the Bible reveals a very different God. In Genesis, He is the one that creates so that we might have fellowship with Him. It is God's grace that continually reaches to fallen man in spite of man's sin. And it is God's grace that gives sinful man the law at Sinai to show him, direct him, and guide him for his benefit. Today, we're going to be looking at God's grace on display in part of the law. But first, let me just share this. It's a quote by Craig Lonesborough. My soul is utterly frantic for that single piece of perfect refuge, from which I can clearly see the winds rip and hear the tempest tear. Yet, despite the ferocity of the tumult, I rest in such a sublime peace, it is as if neither existed at all. And if I have not yet found such a place, it is because I have not yet found God. Wow. Picture with me someone running from an assassin. Frantic, fearful, and frenzied. They know that their days are numbered. And then they see it. A place of refuge where the destroyer cannot harm you. Where your life is spared and your sin is covered. A place of rest and peace where it is as if the storm never existed. A place prepared by God. A place of grace. Today we are reading Numbers chapters 33 through 35, and I would like to direct your attention to a portion in chapter 35. God sets up the cities of refuge. In 35:13 through 15, he says this: these 6 towns you give will be your cities of refuge. Give 3 on this side of the Jordan and 3 in Canaan as cities of refuge. These 6 towns will be a place of refuge for Israelites, aliens, and any other people living among them, so that anyone who has killed another accidentally can flee there. As part of the Levites' inheritance, they were to receive 48 cities. And God commanded that 6 of those cities were to be called cities of refuge. They were to be placed throughout Israel so that all of them, that everyone could reach them easily. If anyone committed an accidental homicide, according to the law, anyone who was killed, their next of kin was to hunt down the offender and bring justice. They were to kill them. It was the eye for an eye type of thing. Remember that there was no law enforcement in Israel in those days, and so this law was to ensure that the guilty was brought to justice. But if the guilty person would flee to the city of refuge, there were 6 of them, easily accessible. They could then plead their case, and they could find redemption. They could find grace. They could find rescue, refuge. The kinsmen could not harm them as long as they stayed in the city of refuge. And when the high priest that was serving at the time of the offense died, then the person living in the city of refuge was free to leave, and they received back their entire inheritance, their land that was theirs. What a marvelous picture of God's grace. When the sinner realized the danger they were in, that death was truly the penalty for sin, and all of sin and fall short of the glory of God. When they understood the only way to be saved was to flee the old life and find refuge in God's provision, which is Christ. They could not just flee anywhere, but they had to flee to the appointed place, just as we must run to Christ. Salvation was not far off, but it was always close at hand. And all were welcome. Anyone could come. The secret to life was simply to remain there in the city of refuge, just as ours is to remain in Christ. A little further in the Bible, in Joshua 27, we're told the names of the 6 cities of refuge. I'd like to take a look at them this morning and look at their meanings. The first one that we read is Kadesh. It literally means a place of holiness. You see, for without holiness, it is impossible to see God, the Bible tells us. And this speaks of Christ, who is the Holy One of Israel. In Christ, we become holy and acceptable to God. The second one we see is Shechem, and it means shoulder. The Bible tells us, speaking of Christ, that the government will be upon his shoulders. This Christian life, it's not just hard, it's impossible. But Christ will carry us upon his shoulders, under his wings. We can truly take our burdens to the Lord, and we can leave them there. The third one is called Hebron. It means fullness or fellowship. For in Christ is the fullness of the Godhead bodily. There is no other place that our souls can find refuge, can find satisfaction, but in his fellowship. The fourth one is called Bezer. It means stronghold or fortification. Salvation isn't me holding out, but it is God holding on. Christ alone is our strong tower, our refuge, and the righteous run into it, and they are saved. Then Ramoth, which means exalted. If you are trying to be in control of your life, I can guarantee you that your life is surely out of control. You have to run to Ramoth. You must lift up Christ as the Lord of your life. Exalt him. Exalt the Lord our God. For it is then, when he becomes Lord, that our lives can truly find that place of refuge, of safety, of grace. Finally, the sixth city is called Golan, and it means separated. Jesus didn't come to make us like the world, but he came to call us out of the world. In Christ, we are called to be like him, distinct, sanctified, separated. We are not changed. We're not changed and made holy and empowered and sanctified by our own works, but we are done all of those things by entering in by the blood of the Lamb through Christ. He is our refuge. We must run to him, abide in him, and find our rest in him. What a beautiful story of God's grace. It's a story that needs to be told. It's a story that should be on the lips of everyone who has found that place in Christ. Let's make sure and share God's love and God's grace with someone today. And don't forget, you are blessed.